Like to kill right? Right around sneak camp, we cracked his ribs, 12 big staples in his head, and his skin off. He was hurt, so he was hurt.
Hey Johnny, what episode?
We would be three, season 2, episode 3. I mean,
I thought you were like putting the whole thing in there.
you can't.
The problem with that is
With you, we did they shot it, but we did season 2, episode 2. So he would do 3.
Three, we watched it last night, it's not that good. All it is interaction between monsters. We don't do stuff in it, so I'm not sure what we're talking about. It's not that much there.
But you might take a look at that 3 and then make, you might want to mold the 4. We did 2 last week.
and we watched it, and it wasn't. To get that, like, all that.
We haven't watched both. We haven't watched both.
Now you can have a short turkey meal. I got to watch it before. Oh, wow.
Hey, Mike, I've been going in ChatGPT and just saying, give me a same brain, this one.
That's all I'm gonna do.
I don't know, just tell me.
Mexico Mission Trail.
Johnny went to tryouts last night.
I said, it's that good. He goes, that stuff's that good.
I worked with a guy named Ralph Stewart. Couldn't get off Stewart.
I should have been one got me out of
That's looking very good. Yeah. Like you said, the whole. Yeah.
Good morning. You doing okay? Yeah, but she's right here. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
We just did it 6 years ago. So, yeah, the other stuff. I think it's gonna be, too much. And then the guys were, that was before, and then we just. Oh, gosh. I gotta finish that in. Come down with that. Move the shovel. Boys. And we're gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, used to, we did it all. I knew all the contracts.
Morning. I got
Good, you all right?
I'm good.
in the parking lot, were they directed at you today? I thought about that as I was pulling up. It's hard to do when you're a little self-constrained. What's the thing about, students in class, they have like 15 minutes. Rest isn't there, then they can. I don't know where that, I don't know, everybody seems to know that, I don't even know if that's a thing. I think that's the biggest urban legend. Have you ever tried it? Well, I would be 15 minutes late. Exactly, 15 minutes, coming in 14:59, gotcha, gotta stay. That's what I was doing this morning, I was just trying to skip the board. So much bigger. If you were to have it, it's a field for something, mine's a spaceship.
Yeah. I drank a lot of smoke the other day because I saw. Not drinking anything hot.
All right, good morning. Sorry it's late. You guys have a good weekend? We went to a funeral, in Union City yesterday. And on our way back, we went through Martin and stopped at a place called The Grind. You guys ever been there? Wow, first time we've been there. Food was good. I think I got like, they call it a frachos, it's like nachos, but it's fried instead of chips. It was good, but it was kind of like an appetizer, because we went there for the milkshake. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten one of those milkshakes, but, it was like, I forgot what we got, the Oreo thing, but, you know, it was the actual milkshake and whipped cream, and then they had like a cookies and cream Pop-Tart, like a whole Pop-Tart, and then more whipped cream, and then fudge round, and then more whipped cream, and then an Oreo, and then more whipped cream, and then a cherry on top, of course. And, we shared it, our family, it wasn't just me, we all took part in it. But my wife was like, how many calories are in this, you think? I said, that's one of those questions you just don't ask. Just eat it and go on.
12 or less.
12 hours, yeah. But we did get like appetizers, we didn't get a full meal, right? So we were saving up our calories. My son's birthday is Monday, so it's also kind of a celebration for him. Friend Margaret were good milkshake, that was it. You know, what's the thing? You know, sometimes the milkshake's really big and it's hard to get through the straw.
When 1970 was Tony's Pizza. That's what.
It was Tony's Pizza, 1970. Well, where we were sitting, you could see the,
You're like a fool or a hot
I wonder if that's a popular place before the games.
water parties like that.
It was cool, it was good.
We have some visitors or something.
Weird.
Okay, we've been in Acts. We've kind of got a theme verse that's been guiding us, and this has been taking place throughout Paul's journey. Before we get started reading our passage this morning, somebody besides Eric tell me what happened last week. Do you remember?
They were on the ship.
That's right. Remember where they're at?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So last week, they were getting ready to leave Crete, right? And they experienced this storm called the Northeaster, and they had been, I guess, just tossed to and fro. I mean, the ship was just, we'll see a map. They were just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and the wind and the waves were just taking them every which way. And then our text today starts when they see land. So this is exciting. So let's just start, we'll start over here and just work our way around this way.
When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach.
But the ship struck the sandbar and ran aground. The bows jogged fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the sea. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping.
But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept him from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to him. The rest were to get there on flying spars and other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached home safely.
Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all.
All gathered in power.
Go ahead.
I thought we were through.
Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper driven out by the heat fastened itself on his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, the goddess justice has not allowed him to live."
And Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead, and after waiting a long time and saying nothing unusual happened to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god.
There was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and showed us generous hospitality for 3 days. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, places his hands on him and healed him.
When this had happened, the rest of the city on the island came and were cured. They honored us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies we needed.
Right. What did we notice?
I can't imagine him standing there with a,
You said you don't like snakes?
hanging off his hand like that.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
He didn't say that he believed. But he did say anything about it.
We're gonna watch the video at the end of class. It's about 16 minutes or so. So it's a little bit lengthier one, but I haven't shown the video all semester, so I think I filled up time. But it was really good. Usually I watch videos to prep, but this one was really good. I wanted to watch it. But he talks about some ancient scholars think that Paul converted Barnabas. That hasn't been verified in scripture, but other sources say that he did. And Barnabas was the governor, the president of the island, however you want to say it, the chief official. And he still has a huge impact on the island. And we'll see this in the video. Anybody ever been to the island of Malta? Well, some of you guys have been in that area over there. Video will be good. You'll like it.
Well, it said that they thought he was a god. So there was some belief, and it doesn't ever say that Paul corrected them in this text. So I'm sure he did.
Gotta use the snake bite and shipwreck.
That's one of the biggest points of today's study.
That's the last time you were here.
It's also the picture that we've been using all semester on our introduction slide is we're finally there. It's him and the snake. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see it now, yeah.
You
I
didn't know?
think it was
No, I didn't. I've always just copied and pasted and haven't even looked at that picture, really.
Where's the snake?
It's right there.
That's a little snake.
A little one. They've got a rendition of it. There's a cathedral, you'll see the video, and it tells there's a painting that tells the whole story of Paul's journey. But people on Malta are really proud of Paul, that they are the place that Paul shipwrecked. And there's a whole painting that portrays Paul's life. And one of the pictures I have is a bigger viper, just up to its hand right there. You see it?
Probably a secondary point, I interrupted someone, but I was saying that.
Just me, it's fine. I'm just kidding. I mean, much like us, they're pretty quick to pass judgment. I mean, he's a murderer one minute and he's God the next.
Yeah.
Much like very quick on the draw.
Yeah. It's hard to know the makeup of the people of Malta too. Like, they were called barbarians in scripture, but it's not, what they meant as barbarian back then was somebody who didn't speak Greek, we're the Greek regime. They didn't speak Greek, right? So I don't know what their religious makeup was. I watched another video that came out about 15 years ago, and at the time of that video, it said 98% of the people on the island of Malta 15 years ago identified as Catholic, and a lot of it they think was St. Paul, right? So he had a big influence.
What was the language barrier there? Cause they, what did they speak? Did they ever say?
Yeah,
I was
I don't
thinking,
know.
how do they know how to communicate? Okay, gestures.
Yeah. I assume they, I don't know.
They probably spoke Greek, I mean, everybody spoke Greek.
Yeah.
And it's real close to Italy, so. I don't know.
Broken, yeah.
I'm assuming that.
And it wasn't a, it said in the passage that, it said it. We found out that the island was called Malta. It wasn't that this was unidentified before. We'll see on the map that it's just the way they came in. If they had come in the way people normally, cargo ships normally come in to the north, they would have seen the board like, oh, this is Malta. And so it wasn't that this was some island never been discovered. It was just the way they came in, like the southeast. And it was a portion of the island they'd never seen before.
Malta is, if you see in the old 1980s Popeye movie with Robin Williams, they filmed it.
Did they really?
Yeah. Apparently he's still going, they have the sex.
Yeah, scholars don't mention that.
But there's a real distinct look to it, you know, the rocks and the ocean and everything.
Okay. I don't know how this would go,
They're,
but
they're probably more proud of Paul than they are of Popeye.
I didn't see that in the videos either. Let's do something a little different and just have a little pop quiz. I'm not gonna be tested on it, you're not gonna get a grade for it, I'm just curious. This is based off, 4 or 5 questions from 27, 28. Which shipwreck is this for Paul? Yeah. Paul said in 2 Corinthians that he's been shipwrecked 3 times, and that was written before this. So this is his 4th shipwreck. He's a veteran at this point. You know, it talked about when the Roman officials like, okay, those that can swim, you get out and swim. The rest of those grab a piece of the ship that was broken and float to shore. Some scholars are saying, I wonder if Paul is like directing all this chaos because he's done it 3 times already, right? He's been shipwrecked 3 times. This is 4th. How many people were on the ship? That's right, 276. That's a lot of people. Yeah. A lot of people on one ship. They said these cargo ships were just massive. They didn't have like passenger ships back then. It was just cargo ships. And so everybody just kind of piled in on these massive ships. Almost 300 people though. That's a lot. Scholars estimate the shipwreck occurred during the month of, yeah, guys are.
Talking, I just Googled Malta and was reading about it. It said back then, the museum covers like 7,000 years of
Maybe you
history.
can answer the next question.
But it appears to be an amazing vacation spot where a lot of super rich people go with their mega yachts.
Really? Yeah, on the video that I'll show, it looks like a great place to visit. Yeah. Okay, what's the length and width of the island of Malta? How big do you think it is? We're 3 for 3 so far.
Do we just guess?
Nobody wants to take a guess and mess up our streak?
I think 17.
Oh, really? There you go. Good job. We made 100.
But during World War II, wasn't there a conference there of all the leaders of the Allies?
Johnny says, yeah.
All right, let's go through this a little bit. I didn't realize when I converted my notes to this Kindle that it would be so small, so I can't really read it. I just have to wing some of this, but I know we usually like to break apart different pieces of the passage and really go in depth with things that we might miss, and we'll do that a little bit, but for some reason, when I was reading this passage, it just, I think what happened is when I first started reading it, I wonder what Malta's like today, so I just Google Maps. You can take a little orange guy and you can just drop him in different places for studying, where the cars went or people were taking pictures. I happened to drop him at a place that was called St. Paul's Bay. Well, that seems appropriate, that's what we're talking about. And it's the place where they believe that the shipwreck occurred, and there's a big statue of Paul there. And for some reason, it just hit me like, and that's been all, ever since I've been in this class, it's just humanized acts. Like, it's so easy for me to think about Paul was shipwrecked, that's a fact. He was going to Rome, that's a fact. But not really trying to put myself in the shoes of Paul or these prisoners. And so, for whatever reason, I just really felt that as I was studying for this morning, just trying to picture myself there. And so a lot of this is us just trying to get in their shoes and see what it might have been like for them, and how God took a shipwreck and it changed the people of Malta. They did not recognize land. We already talked about that. If they had come the normal way, they would have recognized it. And so when they left Crete, typically, it's not my experience, it's what the scholars say. You just go straight here. So this wasn't necessarily a destination spot unless you were delivering some cargo, but usually the ports are on this side of Malta. Scholars believe that they tossed to and fro from the storm, the northeaster, and they came up this way, which is closer to where St. Paul's Bay is. And so they didn't recognize it because most people don't sail up through that way. And so when they finally got to land, I guess somebody told them, oh yeah, hey, this is. What was that?
How probably was the sandy beach? Buried or not?
Yeah, when you look up Malta today, where St. Paul's Bay is, it's very rocky. And where they would have boarded in Crete today is like the harbor back then. Where it is now is more of a marshy area. And so one of the guys on the video was just talking about, shores change and environment changes and stuff. And so who knows what it would have looked like 2,000 years ago. But where they think he landed now is just like rocks. I mean, it would have been pretty rough. But when they ran aground, they were, scholars think, some 300, 800 yards away from the shore. And so they weren't necessarily like right there by it. They were still a few football fields away from the actual shore when they hit that sandbar. Okay. They saw a sandy beach, said, let's run the ship aground, let's cut loose the anchors, let down the rudders, hoist the foresail, and head for the beach. If you'd use one word to describe what we see right here, what would you say?
We were panicking.
Yeah.
Instead of pulling the anchors up,
Got them. Yeah. I had desperation. I mean, they've already been out for 14 days. They don't know this island. They don't know this land. But it's better than what we've been experiencing these past 14 days. Forget the anchors. Put down the rudders. We're going to get to the beach as fast as we can. It's interesting, one of the videos I watched, they sent there's a crime scene investigator from Los Angeles who was a Christian, and he was reading this, a teaching class. I can't remember the backstory, but he's like, I want to approach this just like I would if I were investigating a crime scene. And so he went there and he did that. He had some divers go down there, and they found 4 anchors that match the descriptions of what they look like in the Roman time period. And they're actually in one of these museums on the island of Malta. They're not for sure if it was the one that actually Paul's boat, but time period, the look of it, all that kind of matches. So it's just, I don't know, when I watched that video again, it was like, wow, this is an actual event that really happened in the life of Paul. Yeah, desperation.
before, when throughout the Mediterranean, unless you have special permission, scuba diving is not allowed.
Really?
Because there's so many thousands of shipwrecks throughout the Mediterranean. Our goals are basically
Okay. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not very familiar with different parts of the boat. And so I'm talking about the bow, and know what a rudder is, know what an anchor is. But these things, it all makes sense. So this is a depiction of, I'm gonna say our cargo ship in this instance was a lot bigger because it held almost 300 people and the cargo. But the foresail was the thing in the front, the bow was the front, and the stern was the back. And then they had the rudders that, they said they were tied up, I guess, out of the water. When they wanted to use them, they would cut the rope and let them fall down. And we think that our boat had 4 anchors, maybe 2 in the front and 2 in the back. They cut all of them. But when it talks about the bow and the stern, the front and the back. So the bow is stripped that sandbar.
You could have cut the anchors to allow the boat to ride higher in the water too.
Yeah. I just assumed they were trying to get there as fast as possible. They'd already emptied a lot of cargo during the storm, so I think they were just trying to get there ASAP. But anyways, the front hits the sandbar, the stern is taking a beating, so much of a beating that towards the end we see they're saying, hey, take a piece of the boat and just float. So that's the end of our boat here. Soldiers plan to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. When I first read this, I thought, is that just like default? Like, either they will escape or we kill them. There's not a chance that they wouldn't escape. So they just assume, well, let's kill them. And why do you think they want to kill them? What's the punishment for a guard who has a prisoner? Same thing. And so they wanted to prevent their own death. And I just think about this situation, again, what's been going on? They've been out in the open sea for 2 weeks. They haven't eaten. They're exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. And now they finally, and it's still raining, and it's cold, and it's wet, and they finally see shore, and about 500 yards away, they run across a sandbar, and the boat's taking a beating. Chaos, desperation. These prisoners are going to escape. Let's just kill them. Maybe they would have thought that, or maybe it was just a result of everything happening, but can you imagine yourself being one of the prisoners there? Like, I wonder what they were thinking. We just survived 14 days at sea and all of this craziness, and this is how it's going to end. It's going to kill us. So I think we're going to escape.
Well, back when Paul was in prison, and, you know, Paul and Silas and the feet were in the stocks, and the earthquake frees them, and the guard is going to kill himself because he figures they got away. Of course, they call out to him that they.
So the Acts 16, 12, 16.
Yeah, something
There's
right
a couple
around
of
there, but yeah, but it's the same idea. It's
Yeah.
like the soldier would rather kill them than be responsible for them getting away. It's like that guard is going to kill himself.
Or those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land, and then others that couldn't, they had to take the planks or the pieces of the ship. When I was a kid, we would get in the pool, we'd have 1 or 2 people in each corner. I know you guys have done this before. And you get some kind of float or something to make waves with. And you just start making a bunch of waves on each corner. And so we would just make the pool like some kind of tidal wave. And we would try to swim from one end to the next. And as a 9, 10-year-old, that's an experience. Like, I don't know if you guys did that when you were kids, but you're trying to swim, especially when you get to the deep end, you can't touch, and waves are slapping you in the face, and you're drinking the water, and you feel like you're going far, but you're not. I'm just thinking about a scenario like that, but you're famished. I guess not famished, they ate instead of killed, but after what they experienced the past 2 weeks, and they're trying to swim to shore, I can't imagine that. And then I just, the rest of them are Titanic style, just grabbing a piece of the boat and floating and hoping that they make it to the shore. Just chaos and desperation, and it's such a stark contrast to what happens after they land. Like,
wants to be able to show the video, so we'll breeze through a lot of this, but some of the scholars were saying this brief period at Malta, he spent about 3 months there. We'll talk about that next week, but Paul and these prisoners spent about 3 months on the island of Malta. And a lot of scholars think this was a good respite for Paul. Like, this is one of the very few times that he was actually welcome, and that he wasn't fearing for his life, per se. And so, it's a stink that this happened. Sure, that was a lot to go through, but look what came of it. Not only for Paul, but for the chief official and his dad. And then once he healed the dad, the chief official's father, everybody else heard about it. And they came and got healed too. So I was just thinking, like, what if there wasn't this storm? And they just sailed right on, past the island of Malta. What if they had to stop at Malta, but they could get to the shore, they could get to the ports? None of this would have happened. He wouldn't have met Publius, wouldn't have healed his father, wouldn't have received this hospitality. The people on the island wouldn't have been healed. You think about, okay, well, what if one of those people on the island, it was a mother and a sister, and a daughter, integral part of the family, and she'd been sick, and Paul heals her? What difference that makes for that family? I know some of you guys have been to the Bible Inn, seen those things, but for me, just trying to think about scenarios in that way, I don't know,
Even though it doesn't mention that Paul preached, it's not logical that he wouldn't have.
right. That's just who he was, right?
3 months, is that what's in?
Yeah, he was on the island for 3 months, so it's hard to imagine some conversions there. And we'll see in the video, like, they are all about, this guy has a funny story about when he went to the restaurant in Malta. You'll see in the video what kind of impact Paul had, even today, like right now, in Malta, the kind of impact that he had.
Well, this wasn't, didn't say, it wasn't just happenstance. This was purpose. God was behind what happened, for multiple reasons. Who knows who was on the ship that needed to learn of the fact that we had people here on this island that needed to know, or that just the kindness to Paul. You know, so there are all sorts of reasons that God allowed this to happen.
Well, like Ginger said, when they were, thought they were gonna die, Paul told them that the God he belonged to and that he served, an angel appeared to him and said that none of you will be lost. So that was a testimony to God there.
Yeah. What if decided not to put it in? Yeah, I would agree that there had to be some conversions.
And you wonder too what the soldiers that were there, what they think of Paul. Doesn't seem to be some ordinary man, right? And the other prisoners, what were they thinking of him? Yeah. Okay, I had a few more things, but I want some people to see the video because I think it really brings it to light, and it's really well done. So I'll move that over here. We won't watch this whole thing. I've got to cut off the video.
This would be Paul's last voyage, and he probably knew it. As I thought about what lay ahead for Paul, this soldier of the cross, a reverence filled my spirit. tracing his final journey from Jerusalem to his last breath in Rome would add to the gravity and respect I was already feeling. For 2 years, the Apostle Paul had been imprisoned at Caesarea on the coast of Israel, awaiting trial. Jewish leaders had accused him of capital crimes against the Roman Empire. Finally, at his hearing, Paul exercised his right as a Roman citizen and appealed his case to the emperor. Paul had often desired to go to Rome. Now he would go, but as a prisoner. I'm in pursuit of Paul, the Apostle. My name is Con Campbell. I've studied Paul's 13 New Testament letters for years. Now I want to know him better. For the first time, I'm following his journeys from Jerusalem across the Mediterranean, all the way to Rome, where he was martyred. Following the route from Caesarea, Israel, I approached the southern coast of what is Turkey today by boat, just as Paul had done 2,000 years ago. The Gospel writer Luke sailed with Paul. Luke would record their adventurous voyage in the book of Acts. At the coastline, I rendezvoused again with professor, guide, and author, Dr. Mark Fairchild. We drove a little farther inland toward the ancient port of Myra.
Oh, when Paul writes the Titus, he says, as I left you in Crete, don't scratch your heads. You know, Acts doesn't mention anything about Crete. Luke doesn't give us as much information as we would hope he would.
Though he does give us an awful lot. Be too hard on him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The harbour at Myra was no longer accessible from the coastline. Time had changed the entrance. The port of Myra was important for shipping grain, and from here Paul's voyage would turn dramatic. A replica of a first-century boat sat along the dock in front of the ancient granary. Now this doesn't look much like a harbour anymore. What's happened to this spot here?
What happens is coastlines constantly change because of water. Rivers dump alluvial soil into the harbors, they silt up, and it has become a marsh. So what is over here to our left is what remains of the ancient harbor. This would have been the area where the vessels would have come.
So we need to imagine water coming up to this point, and big enough body of water, deep enough for a large cargo ship to pull in. And the Apostle Paul stopped here on his way to Rome. Mark, why did he stop here, do you think?
In the past, they did not have passenger liners as we have today.
Mm-hmm.
They're all cargo ships. And what would happen is they would go to the harbor to try and line up a cargo ship, and probably a grain cargo ship that was heading in the right direction. And some of these cargo ships could be 300 feet in length. So we're not talking about puny little ships. We're talking about large ships. And you need ocean-going or sea-going craft to weather the storms, and the waves, and the things that you're going to experience as you go out into the Mediterranean.
Right, okay, so we need to imagine a large cargo ship to pull in, Paul to get on, and take off to Rome.
Yes, that's the picture.
The grain ship had intended to reach Rome before the fall storms, but we know that would not be the case. I climbed on board again with Professor Linford Stutzman, who's led study tours called Sailing Acts since 2004. What sort of impact do you think following Paul around on your boat, what impact has that had on your life?
My wife and I say to each other sometimes, it's changed our life. It's one thing to admire Paul from the stories in Acts, but to actually experience and kind of feel the challenges and the commitment, the level of commitment it took to do these journeys and to do a lot of other things besides travel. My admiration of Paul has gone way up. I find it fascinating that he has been shipwrecked 4 times, probably.
What for?
Because when he writes that he's been shipwrecked 3 times, it was before the last time.
Right.
Probably.
Good point.
But the shipwreck story in Acts 27 is the best account of a first century shipwreck in existence in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
So historians and archaeologists often refer to Acts 27 because of its accuracy and details of what had happened. Not only does it describe the wind, the weather, the place, but the tension on board among the people who are desperate. And so that story is one of my favorites to understand the dynamics of sailing under the worst conditions.
We didn't try to sail the entire route of this treacherous voyage across the Mediterranean, but I did go to the island nation of Malta, where they shipwrecked, which lies south of Italy and Sicily. Had they missed this island, they would have been driven even farther west toward the north coast of Africa. According to the book of Acts, it was early morning, first light, when they finally sighted land and ran aground. So I decided to go out early too, in the area of St. Paul's Bay, where many believe the shipwreck occurred. But before reaching Malta, a drama played out that would terrify both the soldiers and the sailors. After changing vessels in Myra, they sailed to the Greek island of Crete, and they had the option of spending the winter there, but the crew decided they would push on their way to Rome, against Paul's advice actually. And they were caught in a horrible hurricane. For the next 14 days, they were out of control, being pushed east and kind of zigzag across the Mediterranean. They were not able to see the sun this time. They couldn't see the stars. It was a horrible experience. But Paul was able to offer comfort to the crew because he said that in a vision, an angel had appeared to him, telling him that he must appear before Caesar and give an account of Christ. And in fact, all 276 on board the vessel would be spared. In spite of Paul's words, they feared for their lives. Acts chapter 27 describes the shipwreck. When the 14th night came, we were drifting in the Adriatic Sea, and in the middle of the night, the sailors thought they were approaching land. Fearing we might run aground in some rocky place, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight to come. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but sighted a bay with beach. They planned to run the ship ashore if they could. After casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and headed for the beach. But they struck a sandbar and ran the ship aground. The bow jammed fast and remained immovable, while the stern began to break up by the pounding of the waves. I tried to imagine the strength needed to swim ashore in rough water after sleepless days and having eaten very little. And we need to remember that Luke survived with Paul. I assume Luke, the historian, was somehow able to keep his parchments dry. And fortunately, he was something like a physician who could care for the sick and injured. After the shipwreck, all 276 passengers managed to swim safely to shore, to the island of Malta, though they didn't know where they were at the time. And some local people from Malta quickly came to help them. And Luke, who writes about this incident in the book of Acts, makes special note of the kindness of the Maltese people and their generosity and hospitality, something that the people of Malta today continue to be proud of 2,000 years later. So they lit a fire in order to warm up these shipwreck survivors and provided them with food and looked after their needs. All right, let's see if this will light. This is how I learned to light a fire as a Boy Scout. This is historically credible. When Paul went to look for some more firewood, he was bitten by a viper. And the local people assumed that he was a murderer or something, and that goddess Justice was punishing him. But then he showed no ill effects from the bite, and they changed their minds and decided that he was a god instead. Suffice to say, word about Paul quickly spread through the island, and the chief official of the island, named Publius, invited him and his fellow travelers to stay with him. And it turns out that his father was unwell with dysentery, and Paul healed him. Well, word about Paul now spread right throughout the island, and all the sick and unwell of the island flocked to be healed by Paul. What had seemed like a tragic shipwreck for Paul and Luke may have become a blessing. Malta was the only place where Paul had been genuinely welcomed. These 3 months may have become a season of calm and recovery before Paul would face another kind of storm, awaiting him in Rome.
Paul has always struck me as a man of action, and he is, but the action is punctuated by long periods of being still. So he's shipwrecked in Malta and doesn't leave Malta for 3 months. And he's been wanting to go to Rome for years. So he stays on target through thick and thin. His pursuit of Christ is lived out in the real world with real difficulties. And in some ways, even though Paul is an extraordinary figure, he's an ordinary person as well, subjected to all these things that normal people are subjected to. But his devotion doesn't waver. And I suppose for me that's challenging, because I'm sure many people can relate to the sort of scenario. Something goes wrong and all of a sudden you lose your focus, or all of a sudden everything becomes myopic. It's just about me and my problems. Then Paul never does that. I mean, he counts it as a privilege to suffer in that way, because that's following Christ, and it's actually participating in Christ's sufferings. So Paul sees it as a glory and a badge even, that it's a privilege to be able to do these things, to suffer in these ways for Paul. And I find that, very challenging in my own pursuit of Christ.
Even though Paul would winter on Malta for only 3 months, the identity and culture of this island nation is still marked by Paul's time here. And some of those reminders of Paul's presence can be found in Malta's ancient city, Medina. Entering the walled city by carriage took me back in time. Even when I ordered dinner last night, Paul was there to greet me.
There we are, sitting at a restaurant in a hotel, completely secular. On the back flap of the menu in this restaurant is the story of Paul's shipwreck on Malta, lifted straight out of the book of Acts, including a lengthy quotation from the book, and celebrating the significance of that event in Malta. I mean, you never see that in a restaurant in Australia or a restaurant in America, but Malta sees itself as being the place where St. Paul was shipwrecked, and his ministry here for 3 months, and his impact here is still felt. So, yeah, that was a nice little surprise as I was considering what to eat for dinner, finding Paul on the menu. Literally on the menu.
Though it is not the only church on Malta named after the Apostle Paul, St. Paul's Cathedral is one of the most impressive. Descending first underground, I was told that this cathedral was built over a 4th century church. It supposedly marked the site where Paul converted Publius, the chief official of Malta. I was impressed by the fact that part of a 4th century church still remains. The cathedral's main level offered hours of exploration.
We'll stop it there so you guys can go, but I thought they did a good job of humanizing and just showing the impact that a detour, an uneventful circumstance can make. And so application for us is when things don't go our way, what is God trying to put before us and what impact can we make on other people through those things. All right, thank you guys. We'll pick up here next week.
Did we
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. I'm not gonna say no. Wretched people like Trent that don't, still have to go into work. No, he doesn't. I work at Purdue, I work sales and marketing. I would only drive there. That's true, yeah, you can.
I don't know, I don't know. You teach without the benefits.
Well, actually, I get better benefits because I get those, I'm paid 12 months out of the year instead of 9 or 10 or whatever. Same benefits, I guess, health insurance. Yeah, retirement. Yes, yes.
But he came home,
I know he's not a good somebody so interesting to do. Not a big extra paycheck.
he and Michael drove.
Yeah, no, they're doing it full time.
Our drug
Well,
one.
it seems like I cut them out, there's like schedule of some, there's expertise in this matter.
It's pretty thin.
He's probably cutting that brand out.
I teach, marketing class, personal finance class. Trent has a doctorate though. He could with it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anyone in my grad class this summer. Yeah, I don't know if anyone does. I think Margaret and Lauren Wharf are also. Yeah, that program comes and goes in waves, that career instruction program. Well, we just started, we just started maybe